Hello and good evening. Good evening, everyone. So excited for you all to be here about why should you complete the 2024-25 FAFSA form. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And now you might think we're starting up from the bat. Yes, because I want you to understand a few things first. First, we must understand what the FAFSA form stands for. It is the free application for federal student aid. And this is a very important step to you obtaining money to pay for not only college, but also trade school and or career school. So I want you to understand that this application is free. There's no charge for this application, and it is an opportunity for you to be considered for additional funding so that you can pursue your post-secondary options. Now, this FAFSA form is not just going to be able for you to determine just how much money you have, but it also determines the federal student aid eligibility that you have. So not only that, but there's also some schools and some private organizations that might use this opportunity and this information with your disclosure, of course, in order for you to be considered for other grants and scholarships as well. So that's the preference of what we are, who we are, but we're going to go a little deeper today. We're going to talk about access to the largest source of aid. We're going to talk about the types of federal student aid that you can be considered for. We'll also talk about those additional aid opportunities I just mentioned, and we'll have a knowledge check at the end just to ensure that you understand exactly why you should complete this FAFSA form. So let's jump right into access to the largest source of aid. Well, you guessed it. Federal student aid is the largest source of aid to help you pay, again, for college, career school, or trade school. In fact, it's $114 billion that is available in the form of grants, work study, and student loans. Get this, every year. So we want to make sure that you understand exactly how to get access to this largest source of aid and the types of aid that we are referring to. So let's talk a little bit about completing this form. Now, completing this form allows you to apply to be considered for federal student aid. Now, when you're completing this form, you have to understand that you are planning to attend college, career school, or trade school in order to access this aid. So if you are not planning to enroll in that next supporting year, so again, this is 2024-25 year, if you are not planning to attend school, then you would not complete this form now. So if you're on this webinar and you're not quite a graduating senior yet, or maybe you're trying to decide, I'll go back to school in maybe another year or two, or maybe you're taking a gap year, this will not be the year that you complete this form. So only those who are planning to enroll or intend to enroll in the next year would complete this form. Now, every year that you intend to enroll will be that time that you complete the form. Every year that you intend to enroll. Now, please note that this form has had its iterations. And in fact, this is the very first time we've had changes in nearly 40 years. And since those changes, is now being able to have the ability to fill out this form in at least 1 hour. So you're going to be able to gather your personal information and your financial information in order to complete this form. Now, when you're completing this form, you want to make sure that you are filling it all out and submitting it. So not only do you just fill out every single box or every single question, but you need to ensure that you are submitting the form in order for it to begin its processing. Now, when you're submitting this form, you're not always complete, and you might also get rejected if there's key information that's missing. So if you are missing any information or that it's not fully complete, there are some steps that need to occur in order for those actions to be rectified or corrected in order for your FAFSA form to be completed and submitted. So again, completing this FAFSA form does allow you to be determine your eligibility not only for federal aid, but also state and also school aid and other forms of aid. So yes, although we are the largest source of aid, we are not the only ones that could have access to your FAFSA form with your permission in order for you to determine all of your financial aid eligibility for federal, state, school, and other private organizations. Now, there are some new requirements that you need to be ensured for the 24-25 FAFSA form. The first thing to know is that we have a new term called contributors. Now, contributors basically means that these contributors must provide their information, consent and approval, and signature to make sure that their FAFSA form is submitted and completed efficiently. Now, who is a contributor? Well, contributor is anyone who's required to provide their information on the FAFSA form. So you, student, if you're on and you are intending to enroll in school for the next year, then you are a contributor. But if you're a dependent student, you also might have a parent contributor or even a student spouse contributor who also needs to complete this FAFSA form. Even if you're an independent student, if you're an independent student and you are married, yes, your spouse may also be required to complete this FAFSA form as well. So you just want to be aware that not only you, the student, might need to complete this FAFSA form. There could be additional people necessary to make sure this FAFSA form is completed and submitted. So therefore, you want to make sure that you're understanding dependency status. And if you're not quite sure about what that is, when you're starting the FAFSA form, they're going to ask you a series of questions to determine your dependency status. And again, if you're a dependent student, that does require at least one contributor in order for you to complete and submit your FAFSA form. Now, after you're completing this and you're finishing it, then you will be notified if any additional contributors are going to be needed. So the form will tell you that yes, you need both parents to complete it, or yes, you need at least a spouse to complete it, or yes, you're going to need at least one of your parents to complete it. So if you're not quite sure, just start the form. If you're having some trouble still deciding, we do have access to information about how to determine who your contributor is. And this QR code right here in the bottom right-hand corner will give you direct access into how to determine who is your contributor and if you actually need one. Now, it's very important to note that every single contributor needs to have their own, and I repeat, their own studentaid.gov account. When we say your own, that means student, you can't create one for your parent and share the passwords, and vice versa. Parent, you can't create one for your student and also share those passwords as well. We want to keep it separate because as you will see in this new form, there are going to be different sections to complete, one for students and one for other additional contributors. So you don't want to get confused here about what information to input. And you also don't want to have an issue with processing in terms of getting mixed up with which account to log into to which sections. Let's move on a little bit here to talk a little bit about some more information regarding the consent and approval. Now, when we're talking about consent and approval, all contributors must provide consent and approval. If any required contributor does not provide consent and approval, then the student will not be eligible for federal student aid. Now, when we say consent and approval, this basically means that they are approving for the access to IRS to transfer their tax information. In this case, this will be tax information from 2022 into the FAFSA form. So again, you are providing that information, what we call the FTI, federal tax information, to be transferred directly into your FAFSA form from the IRS. It also allows for this information to be transferred over to the institutions that the student has listed on their FAFSA form. So this will allow for that school to determine all of the financial aid eligibility for that student by having access to this FAFSA form. So you want to make sure that you are accepting consent and approval. Now, if you forget what I said today, don't you worry. On the FAFSA form, it will prompt you if you decline and say, are you sure that you want to decline, as you will not be eligible for federal student aid. So please just remember that you must accept and provide consent and approval in order to be eligible for federal student aid and to have your federal tax information transferred into your form, and for your information, your FAFSA form information, to be sent to the schools of your choice to be considered for all financial aid eligibility. Now, if any of your contributors do not provide a consent and approval or refuse to provide them, then again, you will not be eligible for federal student aid. So please, this is regardless if they don't have a social security number, if they did not file taxes in the US, or if they have not filed taxes at all. It doesn't matter. It also doesn't matter if they claim you on the taxes. So a lot of questions might come up. Well, I haven't claimed them on my taxes. Am I required to do so? If they have been identified as a required contributor for the FAFSA form, it does not depend on if they have claimed you on their taxes for reporting. This is simply just to contribute to the FAFSA form so that students can receive their full financial aid eligibility. Now let's move forward about who should complete this FAFSA form. So we talked a little bit about why we're completing this FAFSA form and what all the steps are and the requirements to complete it, but who are we talking about? Now, we said earlier that it has to be a student who's intending to be enrolled in a post-secondary pursuit, whether it be college, career or trade school. But that means that the student will have to have completed their high school diploma or high school equivalent, whether it be a GED or even homeschool. So please note that you as a student will need to make sure that it has been completed or is in the process of completion. You do have to be a U.S. citizen or a non-eligible citizen, and that requires either a social security number or either an alien ID or anything else that will make sure that the students who are freely associated states have a representation of it. Now, you must demonstrate financial need. Okay, so financial need is going to be based on those need-based federal student aid to be eligible for that. So if you demonstrate financial need, meaning that there is going to be a balance based on the cost of attendance of that institution and what your affordability is, if there is a balance remaining, that is determining of your financial need. So you do have to demonstrate that. Now, many of you are wondering, how do I demonstrate that in advance? You might not know how to do that, but completing the FAFSA form will at least give you an idea if you are indeed eligible for federal student aid. And you also have to maintain a satisfactory academic progress. So for those who are returning, yes, it does matter how well you're doing in your programs to ensure that you stay eligible for federal student aid. And you also must make sure that you're signing a certification statement. And this basically says that you are not in default of any federal student loans, or you do not owe any money to any federal student grant that you've already been awarded previously. Now, if you are providing consent and approval, again, that is a requirement, as you just said, into your federal student aid eligibility. So you must provide consent and approval as well. So let's talk about citizenship. Now, I mentioned this briefly about U.S. citizens, being a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. And you're probably wondering, what is an eligible non-citizen? right? Well, as you can see on your screen, there's a lot of different other options that determine eligibility for a student. So if you are not a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national, and you're wondering if you are an eligible non-citizen, then you should be able to see yourself on this screen. If you don't see yourself on the screen, then unfortunately you will not be eligible for federal student aid. And this doesn't allow you to complete the FAFSA form itself. Now, again, this is just the student's citizenship. I don't want anyone to be confused that this is including the parent completing or a contributor's completing as well. So if you, a student, have a spouse or a parent contributor that needs to complete the FAFSA form, they don't need to meet the same qualifications of citizenship as you as a student needs to. So the citizenship for a parent contributor or a spouse contributor is not the same as a student citizenship requirement. The students must meet these eligibility citizenship requirements, but not the parent or the spouse. So let's jump into what federal student aid is. Now that we understand what the FAFSA form is, how to complete it, and the requirements in order to be eligible, what are we talking about being considered for? And this is exactly what this section is for. So the very first thing that we want to mention is our federal student grants. Now, if you're not familiar with the term of grants, grants is basically any financial aid that you do not have to pay back. In other words, it is free money. Now, we say the word free because there are some grants that, if they were converted into a loan because you no longer serve in that position or in that major, for example, the TEACH grant. Now, the TEACH grant is pretty much set for students who are going to be in an education component or major. So if they have deemed to say, yes, I'm going to be a major in education, and I'm also approving that I will fulfill the employment qualifications after graduation. If that does not happen, then that grant can be converted into a loan, which means that it has to be repaid. Now, every other grant on this list, such as the Pell Grant and the FSELG, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, does not have those stipulations to it. But you want to make sure that you are familiar with if your grant does have a stipulation in order for you to not have to pay it back, and it is truly indeed free additional money for you to attend school. Now, once your school receives your FAFSA information, they will provide you what we call a financial aid offer. And those letters will be able to let you know, those offers will be able to let you know if you are indeed eligible for a federal Pell Grant, a federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or the TEACH grant. So you will not know if you're eligible until you get that official financial aid offer. Now, that being said, on your FAFSA submission summary, you could also be noted if you're eligible for a Pell Grant or any other additional grant, but you won't know the full amount of that grant until you've been awarded through your financial aid offer from your institutions. Now, if you weren't in our first webinar for this series, then I want to reiterate here that the processing of the FAFSA forms is going to happen in the first half of March. So once that processing happens, then the student will be notified via email that their FAFSA submission summary is available, which they will have access to by logging into their studentaid.gov account. And on their dashboard, they'll be able to see view for the FAFSA submission summary. And there, they'll be able to see their federal student aid eligibility estimates. Okay, estimates, because again, this information will be sent to the institutions that the schools have listed on their FAFSA forms, and then and only then, if the student has been accepted to that institution, will they be provided a financial aid offer in the several weeks after that processing has taken place. So just want to make sure everybody's understanding about what grants are. Let's move on. So I hope you're excited about grants and you say, yes, I want some of that grant money, right? We hope that you are excited about that as well. In fact, more students are actually going to be eligible for said federal Pell Grants. And so, how many more extra? Well, an additional estimated 610,000 new students will be eligible for federal Pell Grant this year. We are very excited about that number, and we want to ensure that you have understanding of how to potentially get access to this federal Pell Grant, and that is through the completion of your FAFSA form. Now, we do have maximum Pell Grant. Now, it's already been stated that the maximum Pell Grant for 2024-25 is $7,395. However, that may potentially change in July as the official amount is released in July of this year. So you can plan for a maximum Pell Grant for $7,395. But even then, if it changes, then you will be notified in July and most likely on your financial aid offer as well. Please note that even if you don't get the maximum Pell Grant, there is still room for grants. So don't think, oh, I don't get the maximum, then I won't have access to the Pell Grant. That is incorrect. In fact, more students will have access to it, and that's going to be based on the information that they provided in the FAFSA. So although you may not get maximum, it does not mean that you don't get anything. So for some, it really depends if they're going to hit the minimum or the maximum Pell or anything in between. And again, you will know that through your official financial aid offer. So let's talk about work study. Now, work study is what we coin as your earned money. Now, this basically is a part-time job for undergraduates, and graduate students can also be eligible for this federal work study. Now, this is money that you earn to help you pay for education expenses, and it's very similar to a job. In fact, it is a part-time job. And it can be held on campuses, or it could also be partnerships with other nonprofits on and off campus. So please note that when you are considering your federal work study, allows for you to get some work experience. Now, the whole premise of this is to try to get as close to your major as possible. So there could be related work that's going to be related to what you're studying in, which can also elevate your work experience as well. Now let's jump into a little bit more information about how does work study work? Well, in fact, there's our total work study award, and that means how much you're eligible for. Now, that eligibility is all going to depend on when you apply, the level of financial need that you have, and also your school's funding level, as these are rewarded from the institutions. So, although you're earning at least the current minimum wage, again, you also cannot earn more than what they have deemed your award is. Okay, so depending on the type of work that you do and the skills that are required, you could also be making more than minimum wage. So you just want to make sure that when you're reviewing your financial aid offer, you're able to kind of see the amount that's going to be granted to you, and that you'll be able to earn only up to that amount. You cannot exceed. So there's no overtime with federal work study, if you will. If you're interested, then again, you want to complete this FAFSA form, and you want to apply and complete this FAFSA form as soon as possible, as the funds are limited. Now, again, the processing does not begin until the first half of March. So you're not late for this, but you want to make sure that you are making every effort that you can to submit your FAFSA form as soon as possible. Now, let's talk about one of the final areas for access to federal student aid, and that is our federal student loans. Now, if you apply for financial aid, you may be offered loans. Now, the keyword is the offered loans part, as your school will be able to say, this is how much we can offer you in loans. Now, when you receive a loan, you are borrowing money, which means it has to be paid back, plus the interest that accrues while you are taking out that money. So you're planning to attend school and you still have a balance and you want to consider a federal student loan, then you'll be able to have access to that through your financial aid offer, which will deem how much you're actually eligible to receive. In that offer, you don't have to receive the full amount that's granted to you or offered to you. You can also take a percentage or in a certain amount of the loans that are offered to you. Now, there are some benefits to direct loans, and you're probably saying, hey, is the federal government the only place that I can get a student loan? And it is not. There are the federal government loans, and there's also private loans. Now, what's different about federal loans is that they have a fixed interest rate. Now, if that's a new term for you, a fixed interest rate means that the rate does not change. It stays the same throughout the entire time that you own that loan, meaning that it's still not fully paid back. So if you have a rate, let's say that it's a 4.8% rate, the entire time that you have that loan, it will stay at 4.8. It will not adjust for the next year, then move up to 5.2 or 5.4, and it can not fluctuate. It will stay at 4.8. Now, it's important to note here that every year that you take out a student loan, because you're applying every year through completing the FAFSA form, that those rates might change by year. So if I taken out a loan in my freshman year at 4.8, that loan that I took out my freshman year starts at 4.8. But the next following year, if I am planning to take out another loan as a sophomore, that rate may not be 4.8. It could be less than 4.8 or it could be more than 4.8. So you might have different interest rates based on how many times you take out a loan per year in the year that you've taken out that loan. So please make a note of that they might be changed based on that, but that fixed rate will stay the same based on the year that you've taken out that loan. Now, please note that federal student and parent loans are only issued by the government, and there are certain terms and conditions that are set by the law. So there are benefits to this. Again, you got your fixed interest rates, and you also have access to income-driven repayment plans. Now, if you're not quite excited about that, let me tell you why you should be excited about that. Now, income-driven repayment plans basically says we're going to look at your income, how much you make, and your family size to determine your 10% discretionary income, which is your after all your bills are paid and after everything has come, the 10% of that remaining money that you have left over will be calculated to making your repayment plans to pay back your student loans. So if you're working with a private loan, they most likely will not offer income-driven repayment plan for you, and they're only going to set it for you to make sure that you're paying off that loan instead. Also, some private loans might offer a variable interest rate. And now that's different from the fixed interest rate that stays the same. Variable, as you know, can fluctuate and it can change. So these are the benefits to federal student loans that you want to be considered for. Also noting that there could be options for loan forgiveness, like public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment plan loan forgiveness as well, that only you'll have access to if you have a government-issued student loan. So let's make sure that you're aware, and I encourage you to actually look further into student loans if you are having questions or you want to ensure that you have more information about what student loans from the federal government might entail. Now, I talked about state and institutional aid earlier. So we just said everything about federal student aid. Again, your grants, your work study, and your student loans. But I also mentioned that completing the FAFSA form also grants you access to state and institutional aid, or it may also grant you state and institutional aid. Now, what do I mean by may? Now, your state might offer a grant or even a loan to help you pay for school. So some states offer additional assistance for students who are going to be staying within the state to attend school and or also support students outside of state as well. It really depends on every single state, it's different. So if your state, if you're not quite sure about your state, I again encourage you to scan the QR code in the bottom corner here, because it will take you to studentaid.gov/FAFSA deadlines. And there you will see every single state, the deadline to complete the FAFSA forms to be considered for state aid, and also what state aid entails for that as well. Now, there are also many institutions that offer financial aid as well. So if you're saying, hey, I want to get a scholarship from my institution, or I got a grant from my institution, all of that is possible as well. And they're going to be considering your financial need, again, based from your FAFSA information, in order to be able to grant you any of those opportunities as well. Now, it's important to know that this only determines your eligibility for state and school aid. It does not guarantee that you will have state or institutional aid. So please note that deadlines are important, and that you also want to make sure that you're not only looking at your state, but if your college says that you must submit your FAFSA form by a certain deadline as well in order to be eligible for any of that state or school aid. So now let's talk about some additional aid opportunities. Now, I said that there might be some private organizations that might want to have access to your FAFSA form. Now, when I say private organizations, I'm talking about outside scholarships or from organizations, nonprofits, who really want to help you, the student, pay for college or career school or trade school as well. And so these scholarships may not be repaid as well. A scholarship is free money. So if you're new here, you're not quite sure with a lot of the terms, scholarships is free money. And it can be based on your academic merit, but it also can be based on your talent and any area of study that you plan to have, or even some of your hobbies or interests as well. So your scholarships may vary in award amount. Some of them can cover the entire cost of your tuition for your institution, and some of them might be a one-time award only for a few $100s. And some might also even be renewable, right? So scholarships has a wide variety of opportunities there. Now, again, these scholarships can come from almost anyone that's nonprofit or a private organization. So you want to check for your employers, any employers that you work, you or your parent. You want to talk to other individuals who might be doing community service that offer a scholarship. Any private companies, nonprofits, any type of communities, religious groups, and places of faith. Professional social organizations as well offer thousands of scholarships every year. And again, we want the free money as much as we can to help you pay for school. So we encourage you to be more diligent in trying to find what these scholarship opportunities are and see that you apply to them. You'll also see the QR code here in the bottom right that will also give you additional information about scholarships, and even a resource through the labor workforce in order for you to find some additional scholarships to give you a head start. So now that we covered all that, let's make sure that you understood everything that happened today and that you understand why, in fact, you should complete this FAFSA form. So here's the first question. Is the statement true or false? Now, you don't have to type this in the chat, but you can just give it a thought to yourself and say, is it true or false? There is no difference between a submitted FAFSA form and a completed FAFSA form. Is there a difference? There is no difference between a submitted FAFSA form and a completed form. Is this true or false? See what you say. The answer is false. That is not true. Okay. There is a difference. Okay. So let's be clear. There is a difference. Your completed form means there's key pieces of information that were submitted and they were completed the whole thing. Now, if that missing information was not considered, right, like consent and approval, or maybe you're missing some important information, financial details are missing, or even questions that you failed to answer, or maybe even your signature. was not submitted, then that is an incomplete FAFSA form. And therefore, it's going to be hard for us to determine your eligibility for federal student aid. So you want to really take your time and complete your 24 to 25 FAFSA form and make sure that you're completing all and filling out all the information. So that way you are ensured that you can submit a completed FAFSA form. Again, you're going to need to log into your account. So you need your username and password in order to provide your electronic signature for your online FAFSA form. And you can do that by navigating to your dashboard. Now, if you're having missing information in your FAFSA form, when you go to your dashboard, it will show your 2024-25 FAFSA form, and it will say that you have actions required. So if you have actions required, we encourage you to click on that button to see more information about how you can correct those changes. Question number 2, is this statement true or false? To be eligible for federal student aid, all contributors must provide their information, consent and approval, as well as signature on your FAFSA form. Is this true or false? I think you guys know this one. It is true. Yes, it is absolutely true. You and one of your contributors, if you're a dependent student, remember, if you're a dependent student, you need at least one contributor to provide information on the FAFSA form. So if you and or any additional contributors are required, yes, you must provide consent and approval. Yes, you must provide a signature. And yes, you must provide all of your information in order to be eligible for federal student aid. Let's go on to question number 3. Which of the following financial aid sources will you have access to after you complete the FAFSA form? Which one? Which of the following will you have access to after you submit your FAFSA form? A, the federal government, B, your state, or C, your school? What will you have access to? What financial aid sources? Okay, let's see what you said. If you said all 3, you are correct. Again, remember, completing this FAFSA form does have you have opportunity to have access to not only federal student aid, but also state aid and also institutional school aid as well. So this is why it's super important that you want to complete this one form to get access to all of those 3 sources to be considered for financial aid for your post-secondary endeavors. Last question. Is this statement true or false? Completing your FAFSA form by the federal deadline will give you the best chance of maximizing your financial aid funds available. Is this true or false? Completing by the federal deadline will give you the best chance. Well, let's see if you get this one right. The answer is false. Now, the school and state deadlines are the ones that hold prior deadlines to the federal deadline. So you want to really aim for the deadline of your school and your state deadline first to ensure that you'll be able to have access and receive as much aid as possible for your financial aid and for your school of your choice. So again, you want to check your school and your state deadlines. This webinar, again, will have access on our YouTube channel. There will be a link for you to request the PDF of the slides. So I encourage you to go ahead and do so, because that QR codes that are submitted in there will give you direct access to all of those deadlines and some more important information. So where do you find more information? Well, always studentaid.gov. So if you haven't visited our studentaid.gov site, I encourage you to do so. On studentaid.gov, you will be able to see all information, all questions regarding completing this FAFSA form. You'll be able to get more information about all of our federal student aid programs. That includes the Pell Grants, all federal grants, not just the Pell Grant, but all grants. It also gives you access to the work study and also student loans as well. Again, we invite you to follow us on our social media as well. from Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and on Twitter or X as well. So that's going to be the conclusion of our webinar. We want to at least open it up for feedback. We would love to hear from you. So please take out your phones and make sure that you scan the code here in order for us to hear more from you. Thank you.